Good morning, good morning, good morning. Happy Monday, everybody. So I'm going to give you guys all a quick productivity hack. I don't know if anyone has ever used this, but I'm going to share my screen here. It's called a Pomodoro calendar or timer, right? So essentially the concept is if you list out a singular task or activity, you spend 25 minutes focused on the task, you take a 5-minute break and then go to the next thing, right? And what becomes interesting over time is when you're really just focused on that one thing for 25 minutes, your brain's going to be like, all right, what I get done, what I get done, what I get done. And it allows you to take bigger projects and simplify them, right? So if you think about our philosophy, activity over outcome. Now, when you think about outcome, you have to be project managers to realize how long something takes, what can get done. And many times we set ourselves up for these unrealistic expectations where at the end of it, you're just disappointed. Because if you're like, I'm going to call, for example, 10 people in this hour I have time block, that means you need to understand how to have 6-minute conversations. Does anyone here know how to have 6-minute conversations? Exactly. I would literally have to call Jessica and say, hey, Jessica, it's Shrug. I was just thinking of you. I literally have 5 minutes before I was going to call into a doctor's appointment. I just want to say, hey, how are you? And how was your summer in your new apartment? Right. So that would literally be a 5-minute conversation. But it's hard for us to do that, right? Like that takes timing, it takes practice. So if you just flipped it and said, okay, for the next 60 minutes, or if you're doing a Pomodoro calendar, for the next 25 minutes, I'm going to reach out and have meaningful conversations with people who have already trusted me to transact real estate. You're going to have an entirely different outcome and feeling. Does that make sense, everybody? All right, cool. All right. And so before I get started on the objection I have, does anyone else have any objections or things that have come up in their business that they'd like to share or role play out with the group or like an answer for? Remember, I'm programming you to show up. I know in the last week, I find it very hard to believe out of the 20 some odd of you that are here that nobody had any kind of challenge, conversation, or something that they just felt stuck on. It's okay to share big, small, and different. Like it takes some courage. But if not, I'm just going to go on to the conversation that I have. So the conversation up, Sharon, there we go. And then Brian, perfect.
Yeah, couldn't see how to raise my hand, but I think something that I could probably use help with is explaining to seller clients why they may or may not want to communicate to the other side, the advantages and disadvantages as to why they may want to commit to the other side if they're offering compensation. Is that something they offer on the front end? Do they say, hey, we'll wait and see what the offer is? And what are the pros and cons of doing that?
That was the objection I had today. Why I don't want to pay about solutions compensation, right? So, all right. So first of all, let's go into a bigger overview. And Brian, I'll get to you next. I see it. So here's the thing. Number one, there's like a kill list of words, right? A word leads to a thought, right? If you use the words buyers, agents, compensation, where else have they likely heard that word? Starts with an M. The media. And does the media have anything good to say about the profession that we all love and do every day? No, absolutely nothing, right? I feel like good media died with Peter Jennings and investigative reporting, and that was like a long time ago, right? Where they actually cared about both sides of the story, right? Or they had on Fox, they used to go into these stores and literally bust fraud and show people like doing things that would take advantage of people. But no, it's all the end of 6% commission. Well, I can tell you here in Fairfield County, Westchester County, Long Island, there is no 6% commission, right? Unless you do an REO, right? So here's the thing. There's certain words that will trigger people to say certain things, right? So number one, it is not compensation. Don't ever use that word again. Number two, if I'm selling my phone and I hire Sharon to sell my phone, I understand her that I'm going to pay her a commission to sell the phone, correct? Yes, everybody, make sure you're with me. I know it's Monday morning, right? The second part is, if Sharon then told me, okay, what kind of commission do you want to offer out to the buyer's agent? The first question would be like, well, why am I paying for somebody else? That's the buyer's responsibility, right? The next thing to keep in mind is they've never heard or thought of these words, buyer's agent's compensation, until this lawsuit. So it literally, if you dig into these words, which most people will on Google or ChatGPT, there is nothing positive that supports this, right? So then we get into how do we want to frame the conversation? And number one, I will start by saying this. Anybody that's advising people, and this is my personal and professional opinion, wait to the offer and then we can negotiate, is putting the seller at a disadvantage. I'll tell you why. If you look at the way that incentives work in all of these other businesses, right? Incentives are created for what? Just unmute yourself and answer the question. Why do people offer out incentives? Martha, I see your
Take action.
Take
Get the-
action, okay?
Get the
Martha,
buyer, to get the buyer interested.
to get the buyer interested, right? Anybody else?
Persuade them.
Persuasion, influence, making a decision, to Rob's point, and bringing people in. Those essentially are the reasons they have incentives. Now, imagine you went to Mercedes and it said, we have incentives for cars, come in and we'll tell you about it. Is that somewhere you really want to go? No, right? You go to Bloomingdale's. It's like, we have a great sale. Well, how much do you have off, right? There is a reason that every other brand in the world that offers an incentive to a buyer to come in and persuade, influence them to take an action, advertises what the incentive is. So there is no advantage to a seller not advertising things. So I would turn around, Sharon, I would say, hey, if you're going to buy a car and there was an incentive and it just said there was an incentive, but you didn't know how much money you had to come out of pocket, you didn't know what the incentive is, would you potentially just not want to go because you didn't know if the incentive would cover what you needed it to cover? And everyone's going to say yes. So can we mutually align around the fact that an incentive is created to help a buyer come to your property, to offset their costs, and ultimately position your home in a better way than other homes that don't offer incentives? What would you say to that? Sharon?
I agree.
You agree, right? So as you could see, framing the question, right? So how do I want to talk about commission? Like, anyone ever see the movie Fight Club? First rule of Fight Club, don't talk about Fight Club. First rule of commission, don't use the word commission or compensation or buyer's agent's compensation or buyer's agent's commission. That is the first rule. So when you get to this place in your presentation, you're going to say what we, right? Because remember, you did pricing, you did positioning, and you control, I control, we control, right? You could say what we have to discuss now is if we want to offer an incentive to the buyer, not the buyer's agent, to the buyer, because it's offsetting their costs. To the buyer. And then I want you to follow it up with this line. To be very clear, you are not required to offer anything if you choose not to. And whatever you decide to do, I support you 100%. Do you think that changes the way someone would approach the conversation? I've completely disarmed them. I didn't call it a buyer's agent's commission. I didn't push them into why they need to do it. I told them that they actually don't have to offer anything, and whatever they choose to do, I support them 100%, which shows that I'm on their side. It's like your kids. Hey, Shrug, I would love it if you played the sport. You don't have to, but let's talk about it. And, whatever you do, just know daddy will support you 100%. The child will go into the conversation with like no pressure. Think about this on a human level. If you feel that you have to be a certain way for certain people, and you can't just be yourself, how much pressure does that put on you? How uncomfortable is that? Right? Doesn't feel good. Like you're making this huge choice to make a big decision for your most valuable financial asset. An incentive, or we can call it a commission here, is expensive. It's a lot of money. You're trying to make sense of all this. You're seeing all these media headlines, right? So just remember, there are three types of people. There are the opportunists, people that are looking at this and never wanted to pay you anyway, and now are looking at a way around it. And for the opportunists, if they don't want to pay, they don't want to pay. Don't lose the listing. And you're going to say, great. I would turn around to the opportunists and I would say, look, based on the fact that we are not offering out incentives, and buyers essentially, even though we can't control if they put it in their offer anyway, are going to have to come out of pocket to pay for this home, where in the other ones that are on the market, they don't. So the way that you position your home, Sharon, on the market is more valuable than ever before. We want to create a scenario where there's so much demand that the incentive is irrelevant. Then there's the advocate. The advocates are easy, right? How many people have had clients that like you start having this conversation and they don't even really care? They're like, yeah, it's always worked like this. I see the value in this. I just want to keep it the same way, right? By the way, I'm one of those people. If I was selling my home right now, I would say what works and what has worked, you don't need to change history. Like things have worked like this for many, many years. I'm also not naive that one market sample size in Missouri is not the same thing as all of these other markets, especially higher end luxury metro markets or suburban markets. And then there is the questioner, a person that doesn't know what to do. They've heard some things from friends, families, colleagues, and everywhere in between. Bill? You got to mute yourself.
Shirag. Oh, okay. Shirag, would we ever bring up the fact that the buyer is the one who really is paying the commission? You know, that old line, they're the ones bringing the money. And we, could decide, we could strategize with your price to cover that. I mean, I know we used to do that in the past.
Okay, so ready? Here's a more simple way of doing it.
Okay.
If I was buying a house, right? Like the simple way, have people asked you, like, what is this lawsuit, right? It's a simple way. I would just say, look, the lawsuit simplified is decoupling commissions, meaning if you're selling your house, you're paying the agent representing you. If you're buying a house, you're paying the agent representing you. And I would say, so Bill, if you and I were buying a house, it was $1 million, and there was anywhere from like a $20,000 to $30,000 investment for the services, right? Now, my question would be, if there was an incentive to offset that cost, most of it or all of it, how would that impact your decision to go view a property? Right? And listen, the more you can frame it in a way that puts them in the buyer's seat, and it aligns with what they do. And the other really slick part about doing this is, as soon as they say, I don't care if I wanted the property, I would pay for it, there's nothing you can say or do that will change that, right? There's only one other talk track. Be like, I completely understand, and I would not be doing my job, Bill, if I didn't walk you through this scenario. Just remember, if that's your decision, I support you 100%, but I have to provide you all the options so you can make the best decision through information. So, Bill, where are you moving to?
Florida.
And you had mentioned earlier that you need the proceeds from this home to buy the next one, correct?
Right.
So when a buyer goes into contract, is it safe to say that you'd start to be making some pretty large life decisions and financial commitments?
Yeah, sure. Definitely.
And if something went wrong with that timeline, would that pose a problem for you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Have you ever wondered what a buyer's agent what a buyer agent does in exchange for the compensation they receive?
Yeah, really have. Yeah.
Got it. So look, I'll apologize in advance. There's a lot of things in here that are just like internally for our team, but I just want to share this with you. Take some time to look at it and let me know your thoughts, right? And notice I said there's a lot of internal things, right? Because we're going to show them all the stuff. They have no idea about any of this stuff, right? And so you just let them sit in silence and read it. It's going to probably take them 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes to go through it. And then I would say, Bill, the only thing I want you to think about is if someone had little to no real estate experience and they had a full-time job and someone wasn't doing all these things, remember, I just represent you in the transaction. What is the likelihood or probability that something might go wrong and impact your timeline?
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. That's a high probability because if they don't know what they're doing.
So would it be safe to say that potentially offering out an incentive for a buyer and having professional representation not only might increase your buyer pool, but more importantly, make sure you have a smooth timeline and that you don't lose money?
Yeah. Okay, I see that.
That's slick, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
So-
that's the way that we want to talk about this,
Right.
because unless they can, the more you can relate something to somebody's own personal experience, the better it is.
So what you're going to hand them is the like 50 things a buyer agent does or something like that.
Yeah, we're working on our own checklist. I have
Okay.
time to do this today, and I would make it not look like a marketing flyer.
Right.
I would make it look like an internal checklist, right? Because if it looks like gimmicky and flyery versus like an internal like operational document, it has a completely different effect. Because they're going to see that flyer because it was built for a presentation. They look like it's going to be sold, right? So like if you're thinking about this, it's like before a market, review comps, set up a collection, walk them through the interactive process, right? When you meet with them, understand their motivations, expectations, disappointments, concerns, what they envision an agent doing before they need themselves, a comprehensive needs analysis, a comprehensive knowing your numbers, right? How search works, access to off-market properties, right? Then when they go out, organizing, showing feedback, like all of these different things. And offer, and then by the way, you know that moving calendar I keep telling you all to make? That's where that becomes really important, right? It's like a weekly meeting, strategize on movers, timeline, upgrade, like whatever it is, right? Like go on ChatGPT, pull all this stuff out, right? And if you're doing that, a seller is all they're thinking of. And I would say read this list and just think about what the person does. So if you offer an incentive, you know what it's covering, right? And then B, think about all these things relate to what your experience is on the other side, because generally speaking, before this happened, 95% of the time that there was somebody on the other end managing all of these different things. Sharon, does this answer your question?
It does. It just gives me additional questions, but it does answer that
All right,
one.
so come on, that's what we're here for.
So my additional question, following up from that, at first we were saying to say that it is an incentive and the buyer could put it towards whatever you want. And then in talking to Bill, the encouragement was to incentivize an agent to help that person through.
No, you're not. All right, ready? Separate the two, right?
Okay.
It's not, we're offering, like, the only thing for us left to decide on, or what we're going to decide on together, is if we want to offer out an incentive to the buyer, right? That's it. Or if you choose to not offer an incentive at all, and whatever you do it to support you 100%, right? Bill's scenario happens that at the end, when you educate them on what the incentive is for, and you ask them the questions, hey, if you were viewing a property and you knew you had a contract signed for $25,000 for the investment into professional representation, right? To help facilitate, guide you through the process, and there was no incentive, would that impact your ability? Would that impact your decision-making and see a property where some have incentives and some don't? And that one question will tell you exactly where they stand, right? And then you're gonna say the first one is offer out no incentive. The next one is offer out partial incentive where they still have to come to it. Another one is offer out an incentive. This is typically the way we've done it. In all my listings in the past, we've offered out 2.5%, 3%. Then the last one is even if you don't offer anything, they could still put it in the offer, right? And then if they're like, yeah, I really don't want to offer anything, I'm like, okay, I completely understand. And I just want you to know that if that's your final decision, I'm not trying to change it, but my job is to help you make the best decision through data and information. Have you ever wondered what blank? And then you do Bill's talk track. That's like the final talk track. That's how this all flows. Does that answer now all the questions?
It does. Thank you.
You're welcome. Brian, you're up.
Well, I know we're short on time here, but we'll see what we can do. We're in talking with buyers agents about our agreements. In the past, when we've worked with buyers, a range of incentives have been offered, anywhere from 1.5% to 3%, and new developments goes up as high as 4% and sometimes 5%. I want to know how to talk to my manager about being able to put that range into an agreement, because we're being told to put in only 1%, only 3%, let's say. Then how do we negotiate on either side of that? Rather than being able to put in to the agreement, the minimum is this, the maximum is this.
It's
And
not gonna happen. As of now, not that I know of, right? Like the stupidity in this, right? Is offering out floor and ceiling numbers should be something you can do. But as far as I know, there are no agreements that allow you to do this.
then what do you do? You've got you say you have a 2%, 2.5% commission, but now the new development is offering 3%. Do I have to go back to my buyer and then make a rider just for that property?
No, so here's hold on, Martha just wrote something. Let's see, you can put it, but you can, for example, 4% for new construction, 3%. Yeah.
But that's
So
a
you can-
range. That's a range. There's no difference in putting.
No, it's specific for new constructions, 4%. For existing residential properties, it's 3%. So here's the challenge in this from what I understand. And I'm trying to get a call with somebody. Well, actually, I'm going into the city for Connect the Dots on Thursday. So I'm trying to find somebody in legal that I can actually talk to about this. Ryan just put something in here. Per the lawsuit has to be a specified amount, right? So first of all, that in itself is restricting free trade. So I don't know,
Yeah.
like, if you want to talk about price fixing, but again, NAR would actually have to not agree to this. And like, it's just, they're the worst. There's no other way to say it. And I don't want to spend the last 5 minutes we have going off on another rant about the worst trade organization in America, right? So here's the thing. And this is where it gets challenging. You could say, I do 3% for existing properties, 4%, but in the case, if they offer out less, right? Anything under 2%, you'd have to pay the difference. But if they only offer out 2%, I'm okay with that, right? But it has to be on your word, which is weird, right? Where people want agreements.
Yeah, I mean, what we're signing, I'm signing an agreement for 3% with the buyer, but the buyer's now got to take my word, and they're just getting to know me that I'll accept 2.5 if that's what's offered.
Yep.
That's ridiculous.
Yes, it is. I wish there was a way around this, but it's specific to each market and state. And who's your sales manager?
Sarah Orlinsky.
Yeah, Sarah's sharp and knows
She
that
is, but
if she's telling you there's no way to do it, there's no way to do it. I don't see a way to do it based on the way that these things are arranged. I don't see a way. So I wish I could have better news for you, but again, this is something that's just going to continue to evolve. As you can see, Robert is on the full offensive for getting rid of clear cooperation, which is another thing that's stupid. It's your house. Like the National Association of Realtors and your local MLS can't tell you how to market it. But it's not fair. It's a business. Business is not meant to be fair.
I'm not sure why we're paying to be a part of these organizations anymore.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
I'm Brian's business partner. So we're coming off this hot topic. There was another form that we had that is signed by the sellers agreeing to pay a certain amount. If they pay that and it says 4%, will that supersede our buyer's agreement?
I think as far as I understand, check with Sarah, the buyers should get the balance. Right. So these are
disagree.
all, yeah. So I don't look, here's one thing I do know, right? And I don't know, I'll be the first one to say these are more like legal questions, right? I can't speak, I'm not a lawyer. I can't speak to what requirements are in your state and in the Compass office. But in general, you have to list from as far as I understand, and again, go speak with an attorney. I'm not looking to give legal advice. There's my disclaimer. If your agreement says 3%, the seller offers out 4%, you can't collect 4%, right? It's if I went somewhere and they're offering out more and I only had to pay 3%, like the extra money should go to the buyer. That logically makes sense anywhere else you go. So welcome to the new world of real estate where nothing makes sense. Lisa.
Oh,
Good morning. So I'm based in the state of New Jersey, and we've had multiple conversations about this, that it should be arranged. The way to get around it is when the buyer finds the property, and if they are paying more than what is put on your buyer's representation agreement, you just say to them, the seller is paying X amount. They initial the change, and that's how you get paid more. But again, the buyer's got to be willing to get that extra 0.5% or percent from their pocket and give it to you. And that's where relationship comes in.
Yep.
one other thing that we heard from one of my agents is going out today to show something. And the listing agent, who is also a Compass agent, said that the seller is offering, in this particular deal, way out in Queens, 1.5%. And they'll only pay that if you're not collecting any more from your buyer.
I wish that I could give you some sort of like Shrugism, a ninja trick and everything else like that. But look, like when anything new comes out, it's like when Apple upgrades its iOS, like it has a whole bunch of intentions and then there's a whole new set of problems, right? So this is all of the weird stuff. Now, a seller restricting out how much money you could offer is a condition to take their incentive, right? So that's another thing I would go talk to your sales manager about. So on that note, we could sit here. Rob, you have a question? I'll stay on for a couple extra minutes. Go ahead, guys.
No, I was going to say thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
So, I have a question.
Yeah, Deborah.
So good morning.
Mhm.
So with the believe me, I'll work with you, right? I mean, luckily the majority of my business is by referral. And if I tell someone, hey, look, I'm going to work with you, 70% they're going to believe me. But how do you recommend we frame that? Like, look, if they're offering less, I'll work with you. Do you have a particular way to put that for someone that you don't really know?
No, because I'm like you, I'm getting new information all the time. I'm trying to work around it because here's the thing. If I didn't know you and you said, okay, it's 3%, but I'll only take 2%, but you have to sign the 3% contract, that sounds shady. Right? Like it just sounds weird. And then if you make side agreements with the people, who the hell knows what's going to happen? But as an entrepreneur and a self-employed entity, in my mind, you should have the right to be able to do that. So again, you're going to have to, so you're all part of NAR. So NAR has a legal hotline, right? So Google the NAR legal hotline for all of us here that are not in New York City and are not members, and get their legal counsel on the line and ask them all of these questions. Because in the end of the day, they provide you a transcript of the conversation. And if you do what they say and then something happens, that it's the advice that they gave, so they're essentially potentially liable for it.
I mean, I've just told them, again, most people know me, that it will be property specific and I will amend it, if there is a difference. But I mean, that's really the best I can do at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it sounds like you're not allowed to do that if you have an agreement that says 1%.
No, you can. You can adjust, well, you can adjust down without any questions. To adjust up is, invites scrutiny. Unless you did what Martha suggested, which is if you're going to go into a new construction, then it's 4, and then that goes in your additional provisions, is my understanding.
So look, there's a lot of different things that you're gonna have to sort through in this. The NAR hotline's a great resource. Bill?
Okay, so we have like 3 or 4 calls with our local broker, Jason Wilson, every week. And all these questions keep on coming up, and we keep on going back to legal and, getting answers as this evolves. In Westchester County, we're told that if our agreement is for 2.5% and the seller is offering 3%, we can go to our buyer and say, listen, would you agree to go up that 0.5%? And they can say yes, or they can say yes, but I want that 0.5%. So there is a possibility there.
Can I just suggest something? I do not recommend a single one of you ever do something so crazy, right? Like, if you told me that this is the charge and now you can get more and you want more, I would turn around to every buyer and says, good news, this property, based on the incentive that's being offered out to the seller, gives you a 0.5% back, right? That you can use towards your closing costs. You can't ask for more. You already made an agreement. Not that you can't, you should not, in my opinion.
I'm curious, how is that paid to the buyer?
As a concession, probably on the closing statement.
I wonder if anybody's done that yet. It's also new.
Yeah, I don't think we've had enough time for a transaction even.
Right. To say that, okay, I'll give that back, but then does the money come to, how can the money not, does the money come to Compass, then we cut them?
No, I think they just do it on the HUD probably, Brian. It's a good question for legal. Rob?
There we go. Out for a second. I think we're leaving something out, unless it was said and I missed it. I don't think so, though. All right, is that let's say you have an agreement with a buyer for 2.5%. Okay, yes, I would absolutely not ask for more if that was the case, that the seller is paying 3%. But okay, so now the seller's paying 3%, and you know this. Now, are we leaving out the part that your offer is presented, you ask for the 2.5%, you ask for the other 0.5% to pay to the as a buyer concession or seller concession towards the buyer's closing costs, however you want to term it. But commissions are negotiable. So why can't the seller come back and say, well, he's only getting paid 2.5%. I want the other 0.5% back to me. Am I wrong in suggesting that could happen?
Say that one more time.
Sure. You are working with a buyer with a 2.5% buyer's agency agreement. And this, you're making an offer to property where you find out from the listing agent that the seller is offering 3%. Okay. So you make an offer with the understanding that as 2.5% towards your buyer's agency commission, not using the word commission, however you want to term it, and the other 0.5% to total 3% as a seller concession to the buyer's closing costs. Now, let's just say you're the only offer on the table. Okay, there's still some multiple offers going on around the country. Can't the seller come back and say, you're only looking for 2.5% as your compensation. I'm willing to pay that. I want the other 0.5% back in my
Well,
pocket.
this is the other problem with this lawsuit is sellers can offer something and then renegotiate it with the offer. Which is-
Exactly. That's what I was.
It's
That's
like
what I'm
it's like going into a store, right? And them offering off 50% on a suit, you try it on or you don't try it on, you want to buy it, and you're like, yeah, we only want to give you 30 now. Do you still want it? Like, it doesn't make sense, right? Like this thing creates so many problems that and this is my personal opinion now. This is the whole problem with government intervention to anything. They have no idea of what this works like every day. The reason that Compass works so well is Robert, the CEO, is talking to agents every single day and is in offices all around the country. So from the top, they actually understand what your job is and how it works, right? You look at all these other places, the people have no idea. You name me one CEO that knows 1/10 of their agents' names like Robert Refkin does. It doesn't exist. Right? But that's the difference between Compass and everywhere else. So none of this stuff makes sense. None of it is going to make sense. And my suggestion is the sooner that you could accept it, you just have to play the game. And I believe that commissions are going to change. And your past clients are everything. Client experience is everything. So let's just focus on the parts that we can control, learn the parts we can't, and play the game the way that the rules are. It's like Monopoly. All right, everybody. Does anyone else have any questions? I don't want you guys all to feel like I just skipped out. So I don't have another call. I have my Pomodoro clock to do some work for all of you on something different, but I want to make sure that we all feel good about this. And if you have not, sign up for our free coaching month and use it as a way to build a network of agents around the country, right? Say, hey, I'm in this coaching program. Like, let's all go through it together and you all be the leader. Like, you sit here every week, you know the materials, right? So you could say, hey, I'm happy to set up an accountability or implementation call after. I have one agent in Texas. She has like 15 people doing this. And she's like, this is genius. So remember, it always pays to have a personal relationship with the speaker or the coach, which I have with all of you. So use this to your advantage. All right. I will see you all back at 11:30. I love our seller value proposition conversation today. So with love in my heart, I love you all. Happy Monday. And I'll see you all at 11:30 and then hopefully some of you back at 12:30. Bye, everybody.